Hey, podcast listeners. Welcome back to Cute Furry and In Your Roof, Part 2.
Tony, how often do you think you see skunks around West Philly?
In West Philly?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen one in West Philly. They're really common in Northeast Philly.
Bull mentioned one behind the co-op once, and I swear I've smelled them on our block once or twice. But the complication is Philadelphia's liberalized regulations around, or liberalized enforcement of marijuana laws. So now sometimes you think you're smelling skunk, and you're not.
It's a dank nose.
I'm serious though. Like I'll be riding my bike home. I'm like, is that a skunk? I'm like, no, it isn't. Is that a skunk? No, it isn't. That's just a dude parked in a car.
Yeah.
But this time, like I was like, no, that is definitely a skunk.
Right.
So I think they walk around every now and then. So we're going to hear Anna Schneider talking about her research into Grand Forks, North Dakota. This is a skunk project funded partly by the USDA Wildlife Services related to rabies vector research, because skunks can be a rabies vector. And it's sort of a neat look at sort of skunks living in called wastelands, industrial spaces, and sometimes behind people's houses in Grand Forks, North Dakota.
So my name is Anna Schneider. I'm a first-year graduate student at the University of North Dakota, and my research is with urban skunks. I am working with Dr. Jason Belanger. So striped skunks are a primary rabies vector in the Midwestern states and into the northern Great Plains. And they're also generalists that can thrive in urban environments. So they can go from, rural to urban and cross that interface. But increased interactions with people, pets, and other urban wildlife enhances potential for rabies transmission, which also drives the need for urban wildlife management studies.
A quick question to get out of the way before we get much further, but have you been sprayed yet?
No, I have not. I have not been sprayed yet. They mostly, if they do spray, they will spray the trap, but I have not been sprayed yet. And I caught 86 skunks this summer. Most of them were either kits or recaptures, but I caught and collared 15 adults.
How aware are the people of Grand Forks of the skunks around them?
So most of my skunks are in industrial areas where there's no one there at night. They're there from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 p.m. and then they leave, and they're not there on the weekends. And most of the time, they see the kits running around during the daylight or dusk and dawn. But a lot of times people are pretty shocked to see that I've caught a skunk in their backyard, basically. Definitely the kits the babies are a lot more active during the daytime. So the reason for that is when the mom is active at night when she's nursing them. So then when she comes back, then they're awake and they're feeding during the day. So they're on a diurnal schedule while their mom is on a nocturnal schedule. And when they first emerge from the den, they keep on that schedule until they quickly learn that they need to go nocturnal again. That's why in like midsummer, that's why a lot of people are seeing skunks out, and those are the kits, the babies.
What is the life of an urban skunk like?
So they can live in a variety of different places. Usually they like to be, most of mine are, like I said, in industrial areas, but they like eating insects, grasshoppers. They'll feed on garbage. So there's a waste management plant just north of town, and there's a lot of skunks that absolutely love to stay in there. But they'll also eat cat food, dog food. So if people have, bowls of cat food out on their porches at night, you will probably see a skunk there. But the people around Grand Forks, especially in the areas where my skunks are, they don't really leave out food. But it's mostly insects, basically any trash they can find. Sometimes small mammals as well, so little mice. They'll eat those as well. I found a couple different dens. throughout my study, and one of them is actually under an overpass of a highway. So the highway goes over a fairly busy road just on the north side of town, and there's a skunk den just underneath it, under the cement slabs. I've found under a large pile of wood, so a bunch of old 2x4s just stacked on top of one another. I had 3 collared skunks in that same den, and at least 2 others. I set up some trail cameras at the entrances, and so I could see which skunks were coming in and out. So there were at least 5 skunks in that one den. And then another den in more of an industrial part of town. It was kind of under a dock that's usually supposed to, go in water, but they had it on land for some reason. It was just kind of off to the side. I had 2 collared skunks living in there. There were at least 3 uncollared skunks, and there was actually a domestic kitten that was denning with them. So that was, when I was setting up the trail camera one day, the kitten, I heard meowing from inside the den, and all of a sudden this kitten pops out and starts, sitting on my lap and kneading on me, and I'm a little freaked out because, it's denning with skunks. Who knows what kind of diseases or parasites it could have. So I ended up, I left it for a few days. I came back and I checked the trail camera photos, and there were no other cats to be seen in that area. It was just the skunks and the kitten. And the kitten came back out and bothered me. So it was friendly enough, so I took it to the Humane Society, and it got adopted within probably 2 weeks to a nice family. So it was a happy ending for that little kitten.
This is like straight out of Pepe Le Pew.
Yeah. Well, I always thought that the skunks were babysitting the kitten. During the trapping season, I caught a bunch of raccoons as well. Surprisingly, I'd rather deal with the skunks than the raccoons. They're
I'm not surprised, but explain why.
They have a meaner temperament. They'll growl at you. They'll snarl at you. I've never had a skunk snarl at me, never make any kind of aggression, maybe except the kits when they like pounce at me almost. I've had feral cats on trail cameras. There's Norway rats around here, but they're not really mesopredators. I'm trying to think. There's
because of foxes
as well. I haven't seen any foxes yet, but I've heard reports of a gray fox. There's kind of a little creek that runs through campus, and there's some houses around it, and I've heard reports of a gray fox in that area. So I haven't seen it yet, but I'm curious. I want to set up some trail cameras in that area and see if I can catch it.
What is the family friend reaction when you tell them that you're studying skunks in a city?
I get so many surprise reactions. Most people, the first words out of their mouth are skunks. Why skunks? So, but my family is really pretty proud of me. My parents actually came to visit me this past summer and helped me trap them.
Reminds me of a story. I saw a skunk when I was one of my second job, maybe. I worked at a tele-research place when I was 16, which is crazy that 16-year-olds should be calling you up doing a survey. And there was a skunk in the parking lot, and it was like doing like somersaults. And someone got in a car and ran it over.
Well, full grown or a kid?
Full grown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got you there. Yeah.
Yeah, walking around people doing somersaults.
No, I got you now. I caught up with it. I was thinking of some cute little baby skunk like playing around outside, which they do. So the last thing is palm civets had come up when we were talking to the guy about raccoon dogs in Japan. I researched them and found out they were actually introduced to Japan. They're native to Singapore. And so then I saw something posted about research into otters in Singapore.
Yes.
And I asked about palm civets, and one of the grad students involved with this group was researching palm civets. Palm civets, in case you're wondering, are the same animal that gives us Kopi Luwak coffee. The original idea was that palm civets would live in coffee plantations, would eat some of the coffee berries, poop it out, and then someone thought, hey, why don't we make the palm civet poop into coffee? because part of the coffee making process is fermenting it.
Right.
And this is apparently somewhat fermented in the gut of a palm civet. It became a delicacy. And so now, unfortunately, they keep them in, like, sort of batteries of cages, just feed them tons of coffee, collect the poop, and it's become this sort of factory farming thing.
So are they sort of omnivorous, or...?
They're sort of, as far as I can tell, regionally the closest thing to raccoon they got.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, they're maybe even more arboreal than raccoons, but they're arboreal, omnivorous animals that'll live in your roof.
Right.
She talks about how a lot of people do like them, other people get sick of them peeing and pooping on your roof.
Right.
Something Jeff Falks mentioned about the Australian possums, how frustration with them is them like being in your roof or in your attic and peeing and pooping in your attic.
Right.
Same thing with that raccoon.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Wei Ting and I'm part of the National University of Singapore Civet Research Team. I first started my research on common palm civets in 2009 and this was part of my honours thesis, where I was looking at the distribution, diet, and the residents' perception of civets in an urban estate in Singapore. When I describe the common palm civet to people, I typically say that the animal is a small to medium-sized mammal. The characteristic feature is its black mask, facial mask over its eyes, and that reminds me very much of a superhero at night, where they wear a black mask. They are generally dark grey and in colour, and with sometimes with a tinge of darkish kind of fur coat. And they have a really long tail. People might mistake them to be cats, but a quick way to tell them apart is to look at its tail. So a domestic cat's tail is often shorter than its body, but a civet's tail is equally as long as its body. And also not to forget, the civet tend to be a much better climber than most of the domestic cats that we see. So how do you spot civets? Civets are usually quite quiet. They move around at night, and they're mainly nocturnal animals. But if you're lucky, they are a little bit active before dusk and after dawn. But the best way to really spot a civet is to actually spot them by their eye shine. That means you have to take out a torch to shine around near your estate at night, and then they can be detected by the eye shine that's reflected from the light. Sometimes, if they are not too stealthy, they do make some rustling noise. And another way to spot civet is actually by their smell. So civets have a scent. They actually do scent mark to communicate with other civets in the area, and their scent is actually very similar to a plant called a pandan. This pandan plant is actually used in many Southeast Asian cooking and baking dishes. So the fragrance is very, very similar to a civet. So why the civet is an animal that you can see in urban Singapore, it's because that we don't really have that many large predators present here in Singapore. Most of them are already extinct. So for adult civets, their only predators in Singapore is the reticulated python. Unlike in other countries, there are actually other predators, such as the fishing cat in Sri Lanka. They actually do hide out in the rooftops to hunt for these civets. The civet's diet, it's a mixture of fruits and animals. So they're omnivorous, but predominantly fruits. So they eat the fruits that are grown in home gardens, and also plants that are planted along the roadside or in little forest patches. So from the research that we've done so far since 2009, we have a couple of students who studied the diet of wild civets and forest civets. So we realized from the research that some seeds actually germinate faster after they've gone through the civet's digestive system. And because of this result, we realized that the civets can actually play an important role in the ecosystem as a seed dispersal. They have a large gape, so they can eat large fruits, and they have a fondness for sweet fruits, and their high mobility enables them to play this role quite well. And they are able to disperse seeds in many degraded forest patches in an urban setting. So typically, civets are solitary in nature. Usually you just see one individual, and you only see more than one individual when there's a mating pair, or if there is a family group around, so a mom bringing around her young can sometimes be seen. Civets are quite adaptable to city life here in Singapore, and also in their natural distribution. They hide in roof attics. They also make use of man-made connectors between areas such as telephone cables and dry waterways. And all these man-made structures can actually help them to move between habitats at night, and so they're not usually detected by humans that easily. And the main difference that we think between urban civets and their forest counterparts is their behavior towards people. Urban civets tend to be more bold. Some of them will actually allow you to come quite close before they eventually move away. But the story is totally different in the forest. Usually once they are spotted by us, by the eye shine, they would usually move away quite quickly into the forest cover, and then very soon we can't see them anymore. So as a urban wildlife in Singapore, naturally they do interact with people, especially with house owners that have civets in their roof spaces. Just like any other urban wildlife, there are some people who really love having civets around, while there are others who simply just can't stand a civet in their vicinity. So for people who dislike having civets around, usually there are quite a few reasons. Some people are just afraid of the noise that they make while walking around the rooftop at night. It can be quite noisy, especially if they are juveniles and they are playing around, jumping around on the rooftop at night. There are other people who are irritated that the civets come by to help them sell to a fruit buffet in the trees that they grow in their gardens. Yeah, some of them really love the tropical fruits that are grown in the home gardens. And sometimes civets also treat certain rooftops as their bathrooms, and people are also perturbed by the scats that they find on their rooftop. For people who love civets, it's the other end of the spectrum. They are always really thrilled to observe the civets in close proximity. And we have a Facebook page that we encourage people to send us records of the civets, either in the wild or in their home environment. And they sometimes do send us really nice photographs or videos of the civets in their homes. And there was one time we even had an elderly couple who really wanted to attract the civets to their home, and they even asked us for advice as to what to plant in their home garden such that the civets would naturally be attracted to come to their home. And this was very encouraging for us to hear, especially sometimes we hear or we come or encounter a lot of complaints, but we hope that more people would take to understand the biology of the civets and appreciate having them around. So over the past 8 years of research, we know that despite urbanization, There are some animal species that have persisted or have even adapted to city living. And as many cities are actually ramping up their greening efforts, there would definitely be an increased chance of wildlife and human beings being in close proximity. So I really hope that the research that we do, be it in the lab or in the field, can actually translate into practical means to help Singaporeans and other city dwellers learn how to behave around urban wildlife and possibly learn how to appreciate and coexist with some of the wildlife that we have. Thank you.
A lot of us, I mean us meaning the people in the room, not necessarily everybody who lives in the city.
Right.
Your listeners to the podcast certainly are into urban wildlife. We celebrate urban wildlife. I like to walk out of my house and see something cool flying by or walking by.
Yeah.
But then what are the boundaries when that gets annoying? It's one thing, I love squirrels, but now I've got some squirrels living in the roof of our porch.
Right.
And on Saturday I'm going to get a ladder and try to de-nest them. I don't know what to call it.
Right.
Just rip the nest out.
Yeah.
Because there's a limit. And so, you were talking just now about, the question of, as we green the city, we're inviting more wildlife in.
That's right.
What are the consequences of that?
Yeah, what are the consequences? So do you sort of train people, teach people, ask people to become more tolerant of this kind of, invasion of animals of your home?
Yeah.
Do you rethink what what the home means, right? As a space that is built for humans, but might contain certain animals?
Yeah. We have variable boundaries in this, in the sense that, I'm perfectly fine with house centipedes.
Right.
And people I know...
But other people freak out about spiders, right? Or raccoons, right?
Right. So I've decided that my house can be shared with house centipedes.
Right.
Yeah.
People in that part of the world too have homes where they're a lot more open,
In Singapore, big city, or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what Singapore, but once you get out of the main downtown area, I'm trying to remember specifically Singapore, but other places I've seen in Southeast Asia where the home's a lot more open floor plan, and they have they might have
these are designed before air conditioning. So
and they might have
the solution is to have the
I
window.
remember one house I was in Borneo, but I was in a city in Borneo. They had planted wall. It was open, courtyard. It was open to the sky, and there was a pond, but it was the rooms around it were kind of open to it. So you can clearly kind of things can definitely come in there, and being maybe the doors to the kitchen or your rooms would be closed, but certainly something can come down there and hang out right in your space. So
possums in Australia sort of I think fascinate Australians in the same way that raccoons and squirrels, and maybe to some extent red fox in some parts of the country and cities.
And I think certainly in Europe.
Sort of fascinate us, right? Because they've become what sort of Emma Power in her dissertation on border processes and homemaking encounters with possums in suburban Australia homes has sort of called, border processes, sort of animals that straddle the border between sort of outside and inside. And what do people think when they decide to move inside to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Part-time, or they sort of end up nesting in your attic, or, helping themselves to your cat food, or those sorts of interactions. I mean, and there is a downside, right? The urine, the feces, the noise at night.
The ripped up insulation.
Right. I mean, those are, potentially economically costly, totally annoying, smelly, and maybe, understandably not always ideal. So she looked at sort of homemaking with animals, right? So part of her work is more with domestic pets, dogs and pet keeping, and, this sort of work on, renting with pets, and what does that mean, and how does that sort of affect who gets to rent and who is rented to, that sort of stuff. But she's done a little bit of stuff with wildlife, particularly around the possums. And she's a sort of a fascinating comparison between the possums, which are, the majority of people sort of like them.
Yeah, they're cute.
They're cute, they're native animals, they're very much constructed as native animals by sort of wildlife authorities.
When you say constructed, you're using the...
Well, constructed in the sense... framed, constructed, promoted as a species worth sort of protecting, preserving, sort of, a native Australian animal, as opposed to sort of feral cats,
Yeah.
which is rabbits, or which is sort of an issue. But also, an animal's range is sort of shrunk, right? Sort of, they're in fact they're now doing
they are doing
better in cities than
exactly,
they are in sort of the countryside. So people are sort of potentially inclined, to help these animals and to tolerate them. And she draws sort of a really interesting contrast between the possums. And she says that participants in the study that she interviewed viewed possums as examples of healthy nature and wildness in the home because of their legal and popular construction as native animals and their association with bushland. They were viewed this way even when they were known to inhabit urban spaces. By contrast, the unanimous association of rats with humans, the city, and waste, especially sewers, drains, gutters, and so forth, saw rats constructed as unhealthy and disease-carrying. They were particularly associated with germs and the plague. Possibly doing a little bit of a disservice to most rats, right? In terms of sort of annoyance, and it's not clear that rats in your attic would be more or less annoying than possums, but
they got a point with the plague,
similar, very similar. It's not like the sort of plague is a huge issue in our world today, but I think a very sort of similar construction that we find here, right, around rats, and as opposed to, although it seems like raccoons are not as positively viewed here.
It's a mix, and
it's definitely very polarizing.
It's like a litmus test for how you view nature in a lot of ways.
I think so.
Yeah.
But it also sort of skews. It also seems to correlate though with sort of to what extent, like what sort of state of repair is your home in? Would a raccoon be able to move in there in the first place? It's often associated with sort of we have this old housing stock in the city and some poverty, and people really aren't able to invest in there.
But it makes me think also of how, and this is the cultural divide that I don't know the right way to phrase it, because I was going to say it was racial, it's sort of like white people versus, it's not white people versus black people. It's like, I was thinking also of like, the classic examples like the South Philly, blue-collar neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It's more like, I don't know, people who are coming from a suburban background and moving into the city versus like your older residents who, like, you hear stories from people like in South Philly don't want trees planted because it'll bring too many,
it's work,
they think
right? Rats, work, leaves.
Yeah, and then like, just like, this is not a place for animals at all.
Right.
This is for us and our miniature poodles. And then like, this, sorry, not to cast a stereotype about.
No.
But I feel like I've encountered something similar in West Philly also. And it's something that, like, I'm a nature lover, I come from the suburbs where, like, what's the big deal if you have a deer in your backyard? Like, as long as it doesn't crash through your car windshield, it's okay.
Yeah.
And, like, whereas here, like, if there are raccoons around, they are invaders.
Yes.
The other thing about raccoons is they also, in popular culture, are kind of like this, like, oh, you mischievous, cute thing, that's, like, right at my campsite, or, like, in movies, they'll be like,
It's like your little kid breaking into the cookie jar. It's like,
a little bit of that too, like, like some comic relief, and, lots of them in movies and things, and people do make pets out of them, people who feed them.
That seems like a bad idea.
Yeah.
We're too smart to have as pets.
Well, I guess the possums are, the Australian possums are a little bit too small, right? They're not quite as big or destructive as raccoons.
Yeah,
there's such a variety of them, though, in Australia,
He was saying the northern, up in the north, was the northern part of the large, there's a...
Well, he said the larger ones were sort of 4 kilos,
yeah.
which is probably like a starting point for a respectable raccoon, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's like a cat.
Yeah.
How much? Well, your cats are not good for her.
No, raccoons are...
your cats are the size of raccoons.
Well, no, raccoons are sort of 15 to 25 pounds.
Yeah, they're bigger animals.
Yeah, or even bigger. Some of the bigger males can get pretty big.
Do you think there's something about how they parallel, or how they like people say that, like, we connect with cats especially because they are like babies or small children in a lot of ways. Like, they're large eyes, sort of a size that you can hold,
right,
and sort of warm something to snuggle with, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, when you have something like less so a possum, but like a raccoon or a civet. Civets are really cute looking animals, and the Australian possums, and even skunks. Just looking at them,
oh, yeah.
Like they're like,
skunks are adorable.
I know, yeah. So like they're all animals that sort of overlap with our pets in features that might sort of
I think so. Yeah,
hit the pet buttons in our brains.
The only problem with the skunks though is when your cat your black cat accidentally gets white paint on it, and then the skunk falls in love with it.
Anna, did you hear? So in the interview with Anna, she was talking about like this is one of the funny things she talked about is like finding a kitten living with like a group of skunks.
Yeah, in the same den, right?
Right.
Yeah,
that's like
adopted by
like a Paper the Pew like commune, you know, like. You're right. Like no one's talking about if we green the city and make it friendlier for wild, like, or as we make it less likely to incur Clean Water Act violations for the city,
which is really what's driving it, obviously. Yes.
Like no one invests millions and millions of dollars just for the to have more swallows zipping around the air catching insects.
No.
That we're going to end up with a more I would think a more animal-rich city.
Yeah, it seems inevitable, right?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, but I don't know if everybody is. Yeah. I'm sure Tony's looking forward to it.
Of course.
Yeah. I think with that, we'll start winding up. You can always reach us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at wildlifecast. We read a couple comments. We like hearing comments. And, I've got I think what we're going to do next is we're going to do another little bonus episode where actually a listener suggested, and I said go for it, actually interviewed an urban wildlife, but also sort of like a venomous snake human conflict mitigation or conflict reduction expert in Arizona. And I'm going to edit that and post it up as an episode. So between Bry's stuff today and you got ideas, shoot them at us. The nice thing about a podcast is it's pretty cheap and easy to post something up there if we get it.
Yeah, and if a lot of our Twitter followers are researchers themselves.
Yep.
And if you're doing urban wildlife stuff, we'd interview you.
Yep.
Let us know.
We got sort of another bonus episode coming up. I think we're gonna get Robin back because I recorded an interview with a guy at Philadelphia's new freshwater mussel hatchery at the Waterworks, and we're gonna talk freshwater mussels because Robin is a mussel fanatic. Not a fanatic. He loves mussels though.
I was hanging out with Robin yesterday.
Well, there you go.
Kayaking on the Schuylkill.
Oh, you did your birding from the Schuylkill thing? How'd it go?
It was good. It was hard to see a lot of stuff. From the kayak,
Yeah.
We need to go at a time when there's low tide so we can get some shorebirds.
Yeah.
But it's hard to schedule low tide and when people can go and
No, I know that I've tried to schedule myself for low tide experiences or try to catch turtles. Someday I want to try to find that alligator snapping turtle again.
That was a good one, yeah.
I look in the same spot,
Right.
But one thing when you're out there, something I've started to notice is the tidal behavior of rats. More than once I've been out there at low tide and seen rats foraging on the exposed mud and I would say mud and brick, but really because when you're looking at most of the Schuylkill is the term I learned bulwarked, so it's built up so it's vertical surfaces, but you have areas where essentially mud flats or beaches have formed, and so. If you're on the California coast or somewhere, you might have natural rocks as cobble on beaches. In the Schuylkill, it's broken up brick.
That's right.
So you have these cobble brick beaches, and on low tide, rats come out and sort of sniff around and forage in the mud. At first, I thought it was because you usually see a rat out during daytime, something's wrong with the rat, or it's the bottom of the hierarchy rat that got booted out.
Yeah.
But no, I think they're out there just foraging.
Yeah.
So it's a weird. I don't know what to call it, a weird urban wildlife phenomenon. I don't know. Thanks, guys. Till next time.
Yeah, cheers.